Hello and welcome to part 7 of the self-hosted implementation of Omeka for Librarians series. In this video, I'm going to talk about Linux repositories, and I'm going to use a Debian install as opposed to Ubuntu. I'm going to use a Debian install to show examples of what I'm talking about with a Linux repository. In previous videos, we built a server with Ubuntu. Debian is actually the parent distribution of Ubuntu. They're very similar, but there are differences. Initially, I thought perhaps I would go through the exact same steps of building a Debian server the same way I did with Ubuntu, but they're exactly the same. So, well, almost exactly the same. The thing is, you may encounter a few issues if you're using Debian, and so I figured it would be a good way to show what sorts of problems you might encounter, and really the way to solve those sorts of problems is to identify the right Linux repository and make sure it is included in your sources list. So we're gonna talk about how to include a repository on your Linux server. I'm using Debian as an example, but you can follow the kind of same procedure to search out other installations. So whether it's OpenSUSE or a Red Hat distribution, whatever you're using, it kind of follows the same principle. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about are software repositories. Things work a little bit differently with Linux than they do with Windows. Typically with Windows, when we want to install something, we download an executable file and all the work is done for us. In Linux, things don't quite work that way. And there's this great article on How to Geek that really explains this well. I'll attempt to explain things, but if you find that my explanation needs to be clearer, you can come to this site and have a look at this article. I'll put the link in the comments below. But essentially, what we're doing is we have in Linux we have what are called repositories, and every distribution of Linux has various package managers or repositories. It's a little confusing at first, and it takes a while to get used to, particularly if you come from a Windows background where all you need to do is point and click and everything's kind of taken care of. We've previously used the apt program to get different programs. So as you may recall from previous videos, we were using apt-get install PHP 7 or apt-get install Apache 2. What we're doing is we're telling the apt program to look in the sources lists of the repository and grab packages from what are referred to as mirrors. A default install of Debian will get you the main repository. It's kind of the standard that most Debian packages will have. So if you're doing this all from scratch, that's great. You'll end up with the Debian repository. This site here has kind of the how to go about downloading those things, and we're going to get into more details on this, but I just want to show you that this is the kind of standard repository for Debian. It's found on this page here, and right here is actually the one that we use. My situation was a little different. I didn't install Debian on my own. This server was built for me. What we're looking at here is one of my development servers that's very close to what my production server looks like. So it's built on Debian. And because I'm not the one who built this server, and it's not a standard install of Debian, I have repositories that didn't always suit my needs. So in this development server, this is kind of as close to a fresh install as you can get with my situation. So this is a good example of where you may run into problems if you didn't actually build your server or you didn't install Debian yourself. So we can check out what repositories we're using pretty easily, and we can do that by changing directories. So cd, and we want to go to the etc and the apt directory. So apt being the program we use to call the various packages we want to upload. So for instance, in earlier videos we were doing sudo apt install or apt get install Apache 2 or sudo apt install MySQL server. So what is happening is the apt program is grabbing that package, so MySQL server, from the repository that's in my sources list. And we can view the sources list if we just go ahead and ls while we're in the apt directory to list ls-l. Okay, so you'll see that we have a file called sources list, and this is where we're going to look at what repositories we have. So the sources list is a list of repositories that we're using for the apt program. Now, we can look at this with sudo nano, because nano is our text editor. Sudo nano sources, and I'm just going to hit tab to autocomplete and enter. And they just want to be sure I'm not up to anything suspicious, so I need to type in my password. And now I have a list of the various repositories that my apt program can go to. So it took a little bit of investigating for me to kind of figure out what's going on. This is the main package, and I wasn't sure what this is. So what I had to do was copy it and open a browser and paste and go. And I discovered that this is actually a repository that was built by Oregon State University. And as part of Oregon State, we're Eastern Oregon University. As a part of that system, we're using this open source lab, using this repository for our Debian servers. And I discovered there were a few problems with that, because when I tried to install certain things, I was getting a package not located. Had I been using this repository here, I would have been able to actually install those. So if we go back to my sources list, just kind of going through, we have the Oregon State University repository. I have the Puppet Labs packages repository. I'm not exactly sure what they do. I'm not the one who set up this server, so I don't know exactly what the Puppet Labs packages do. We have Jessie Backport. So Jessie is actually Debian 8, which is what I'm using. At this point, Debian 9 is out, and it is fully supported. Perhaps in later videos I will do something on how to update a version of Linux that you're using. But for now, this will work for me, and I tend to like to wait a little bit after something's been released, just so they can work out the bugs. In any case, what we have here are security updates and backports. They're going straight to the Debian website, and so as patches are released and updates are made, these repositories are going to pick up on those when we run sudo apt or sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. These packages here will kind of bring in those security patches. You'll also notice this webmin package. This is something that I added myself, and it's not anything we want to get into right now, but perhaps in later videos when we talk about graphical user interfaces and systems administration, we'll talk a little bit more about this. This is a really great piece of software for server administration, so I think I probably will cover that in another video. So as an example, I want to try to start off by installing PHP 7. In our previous videos, we had installed PHP 7 rather than PHP 5. It's a more recent supported version, and it just makes sense to do that. I'm going to Control X to get out of that, and I think what I'm going to do is just clear the screen. So we will not be able to, if we just ran sudo apt install PHP 5 like it says in the instructions on the Omeka site. In this case, it actually will install, but as you recall, it didn't install on our Ubuntu server. And because I know that PHP 7 is out and it's supported and it works with Omeka, I would rather use the more recent version. So my repository, when I run this, will actually grab PHP 5, and I don't want that. I want PHP 7. If I go ahead and hit enter here, it will go through the process of installing PHP 7 or PHP 5. But I want PHP 7.0. So running sudo apt install PHP 7.0, which is what we did with the Ubuntu server, isn't going to work. Couldn't find any package PHP 7.0. So what this is saying, and you will run into this error message in any instance where a package isn't available, and this is because the repositories that I have in my sources list don't refer to PHP 7, and we can change this. I don't know whether or not the Debian sources page would actually include it. Let's see here. So the Debian. So I'm not sure if this has PHP 7 in it yet. It is fairly new. So what I did was I did a Google search on how to install PHP 7 on Debian 8, and I got this web page here on techadmin.net. So you can come and visit this page and follow these same instructions. I'm going to go through them right now and kind of talk about what's going on. So what we're about to do is we are going to include a new repository in our sources list. So I'm going to clear the screen, and if we follow those instructions, you'll see the very first thing is sudo apt install curl, curl. I already have that installed, and really it is just a matter of running sudo apt install curl. Now curl is very similar to wget. As you may recall, in previous videos, we used wget to grab things off the internet. There are slight differences, and I don't really have the expertise to go into what those are. So if you're interested, do a Google search. What is the difference between curl and wget? So you'll see that I already have curl installed and have the newest version. If you don't, just run the sudo apt install curl. So our next instruction is to use the curl program. Curl. So grab this file, https://www.dotdeb.org/dotdeb. Whoops, typo. .org.deb.gpg pipe sudo apt key add. So what we're doing here is we're telling our server to grab a key from the .deb.org website so that it can communicate with so that they can communicate with each other. And this allows for the sudo apt command to get packages off of this website. So we'll hit enter. And it looks like they're asking for my password. This is odd. Let's see. Okay, so in most installations, you're not going to be asked for your password repeatedly. I'm not sure what I did to make that happen all the time, but I'll just work with it. Okay, so we have gotten our key from the .deb.org website. And now what we're going to do is add this to our sources list. And there are two ways of doing this, and I'll go over both. There is on the TechAdmin website, it's telling us to use echo. And so echo is similar to print or display or whatever. So what we're going to do is echo, and then in quotations, single quotes, DEB. So deb http :/packages deb.org Jesse all. And so what we're doing is saying we echo back this line, this string, and those two brackets, and /etc apt sources list. So as you recall, this is where our sources list. So this command is saying to echo this line into our sources list file. So I am going to enter. Oops, it's a sudo. We need to put sudo in front of echo. Sudo echo and enter. And we get the permission denied again. So this is just another example of how things may not work the way you intend them to. So in this case, I'm quite certain that this file is probably owned by root. Let's see here. Let's ls-l. Okay, so our sources list. Okay, so root user and root user group have read and write. Well, user root has read and write permissions. The user group has read permissions. So what I'm going to do, so this is a permissions issue, and my username is not a part of the group root, so that's where this problem is arising. I'm going to be lazy, and this is another good teaching moment of something that you can do to kind of make life easier, but isn't necessarily recommended. So if you run the command sudo-i, we will now be root user. So we are now the root user, and the nice thing about this is it's actually going to take care of some other problems too. Like I won't have to keep putting in my passwords. So again, this isn't best practice going into root, but in a pinch, it's helpful. So we are the root user, and now we can run our command. So we have to redo the whole thing. So we will hit enter, and that should have gone through. And then the next one, I'm just going to use the up key because it's the same command, only this time instead of just deb, it's deb dash src, and we'll hit enter. So now if we change directories to our etc slash apt and list file, so we have our sources list there, and if we run nano, our text editor, we don't have to use sudo this time because we are logged in as root, and then enter. So now you will see at the bottom here we have what we told to echo into this file is now here. So now we have the .deb repository. Okay, so if we exit out of this, I should mention that you can actually come in and just edit these lines directly in the text editor. And actually, I'm just going to follow standard here and just .deb packages used for PHP 7. Okay, and then Control X and exit. Yes. Okay, so now we need to run. Oops, we don't have to run sudo. We can do apt update, and well, that just updates things for us. After we do the update, we want to run apt upgrade. And yes. Okay, so we can run sudo. Oops. I'm just going to use sudo just in case you're not using root user. It's not going to affect anything. So sudo apt install php 7.0, and now we will actually be able to install PHP 7. So I believe this is actually the install that takes a while. So I'm just going to let this run and pause the video and come back when it's done. Okay, so my installation of PHP 7 is completed and I've cleared my screen. Now let's say, for example, we want to add the Standard Debian repository. All installations or all distributions of Linux have something similar. So Ubuntu has something similar, and Fedora has something similar. So whatever distribution of Linux you're using, you should be able to find kind of the standard repository. Like I said, in most cases, when you install your server, whatever distribution you're using, you're going to get the standard package. But in my case, I didn't. So for Debian, we have instructions here at packages.debian.org. Stretch is actually the latest version of Debian. I'm using Jessie still. So what I'm going to do is just kind of use these instructions here and just kind of put this into my file. So I think what I'll do is move this to the side, and let's open up our sources list. So I'm just going to do nano sources list, and what I'm going to do is just add it up here, and I'm going to do let's see, Standard Debian repository. Okay, and so what it's telling me here is I can do deb http //ftp.us.debian.org/Debian. Okay, so depending on where you are, depends on what you're going to use. So here, the DE, I suspect that's probably Europe. No, I'm not sure where DE is. Oh, it's just an example. So depending where you are, if you're in Europe, you want to find the proper, oh, DE, right there. You want to find the proper URL. And let's move this back over here. So I'm in the United States, so I'm using US. And the instructions are saying next we want. I'm actually using Jesse. In the instructions it says stretch, but I'm using Jesse, so I'm going to put that in there. Mean contrib. Okay, and I should be good to go. So we will control X and yes. Okay. So now, in my previous repository, the Oregon State University repository, I was getting MySQL 5.5, which actually kind of worked out for my purposes because 5.7 and above, there's some issues, as you know, as we encountered with installing on an Ubuntu server where MySQL was throwing up errors when we were trying to finish the Omeka installation. But best practice is to use the most recent version, the most stable recent version. So let's see what happens if we apt install MySQL-server. So I'll go ahead and go through this process, and I may just pause this while I do this. We've already been through this in previous videos. Okay, so that didn't work out quite the way I wanted it to. We still installed MySQL 5.5. So I'm going to take this as a learning opportunity to demonstrate another command that I've found very useful. Oftentimes I'll install something onto my server that I end up not needing, and the best way I've encountered so far to remove something that I don't want is to use apt remove --purge, and I'm going to go MySQL-server and go ahead and hit enter, and yes. So I'll free up all of that, and now if I do dpkg-l and list all of the programs I have on the server, let's see, we're looking for MySQL, and it is still there. So the other command that we may want to try is sudo apt remove purge MySQL, and then if we put an asterisk up here, it will find the files so it will it's a wild card to kind of look for anything after MySQL. So it will look for MySQL and then programs with anything after it. So client-5, common server, all of that will be taken out. So let's give this a shot. And yes, we want to delete all of that. And this may take a while. So nope, it doesn't. So now, if we run the dpackage-l, we should find that there is no more MySQL anything here. Okay, so I really expected something other than MySQL Server 5.5 to be installed. I need to do a little bit of research to find out what's going on there. So I'm going to pause the video, and when I have a solution, I will restart again. Okay, so the problem I was having, well, the thing is, I thought that perhaps using the Standard Debian Repository that I would get something greater than MySQL 5.5, which isn't the case. I did encounter a pretty handy, let's see, I did encounter a pretty handy command. So you can actually tell what packages are in what repository by running this command. apt-cache, oops, apt-cache show pkg and MySQL-server. And so what's available to me here is 5.5. And if I scroll up further, we'll see that these are coming from the Debian files that or the Debian repository that I just put into my sources list. So it's not actually coming from the Oregon University repository. So my assumption here is the Oregon State University repository really builds a lot off of the Debian one. So so really the issue here is Debian hasn't updated its repository to include MySQL 5.5. So again, this would bring me back to needing to do some research to figure out how can I get 5.7 onto my server. So once I figure that out, I will come back and we will test out my theory. Okay, so I think I may have found a solution. And so I found that there is a MySQL apt repository. Now, if you're using a different version of Linux, you have various choices up here. So there's the Yum repository, which relates to Red Hat distributions. There's the SUSE repository. And so if you're running one of those systems, you'll want to check that out. I have chosen the apt repository because that is what we're using. And so this will work with Debian 7, 8, and 9, as well as Ubuntu versions 14 through 17. And so the apt repository includes various versions of MySQL, so 5.7 is there if I want to use that. So the way we would go about this is we do have some instructions, and so there is this quick guide to using the MySQL repository, and what I'm going to do is follow these instructions for adding the MySQL apt repository. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The first thing we're going to do is download the repository, and this can be a little confusing for new users, and really the whole point of these videos is for new users. I suspect anybody who's more advanced in server administration is probably getting a little frustrated with the amount of explanation I'm doing here, but really the point is this is for people who don't really have much experience with this. These are the things that you need to know, and it's really nice to have somebody to just kind of spell it all out. So that's really the point here. So the first thing we're going to do is download the repository, and it says we can do so here at this link. So when we come here, we'll scroll down to the bottom, and we can click on the link for the Ubuntu Debian architecture. I suspect this would probably work for any Debian-based Linux distribution. I'm going to click on download, and it brings us to the begin your download page. In any case, I'm going to go with the no thanks, just start my download. And so there's two ways of going about this. One, I could just hover over it and copy link address. The other is I can click start my download, and you'll see it downloads the files for us. Now there's a way of installing this onto your system using FTP or SFTP client. And we're going to talk about those in later videos. Right now we're just going to stick to the command line just to keep things on track. And also, I mean, it's good practice to really use the command line for downloading things. So I've right-clicked and copied the link address. Let's just be sure. And if we go back and back again, we're back to our instructions. So what we're going to do is we're going to download that repository, and I think what I'm going to do is just change directories cd, and so this will bring us to the root home folder, and what I'm going to do is wget, and then I'm going to right click here to paste in my my file. So we'll go ahead and hit enter. Okay, great. Looks like it worked. Let's just run the ls-l command, and here we go. We have this file right here. And so the instructions on the MySQL website are a little different than what we've done before. So we're not just going right to the source list to make sure that this is in the this repository is in the source list. The instructions are a little different, so we're going to go through those. The first thing it's telling us to do is run dpkg-i, and then it's saying to run to put it in the path of of where this file is located. And seeing as how we're already there, we don't really have to worry about that. We're in the root home directory. So now what they're asking for is we need to put in the version, the package version, which is this right here. So I'm going to do actually, I'm not sure if you can control copy that. Let's just spell it out. So MySQL, and I believe we can probably just hit tab and get that all in there. So so it's asking us to run this command, and so here we go. And we can check, we can do any one of these configurations here. Currently selected is MySQL 7, and I believe you can change that. Let's see if we hit enter. So if I hit enter on that, I can do various versions of MySQL. So this is kind of cool, and you'll see that they're not offering 5.5 anymore. So it's becoming obsolete. We wouldn't want to install that. So I'm going to move to MySQL 5.7. I'm going to do enter. It's already there. So we'll use our arrow key to go down to OK and hit enter. And so now we have We don't have it installed quite yet. We have a couple more steps to go through. So one of which is we need to do apt update. Every time we do something like this, we want to do an apt update. Okay, so now our packages are all up to date. You'll see that the repo from mysql.com is uh, now being recognized, so this is great. And the next step is to apt upgrade. And everything is all upgraded. So now we can do our again, if you're not using root and you're a user, you would use sudo. But I've just been sticking to root to make things easy. So we do our apt install MySQL -server and enter. And let's see here. So it's telling us MySQL community client, and I believe that's what we're looking for. So yes, and okay. So I actually, before starting the video again, I kind of went through and did this. And so what it's doing is saying, do you really want your MySQL server package updated? And I'm just going to say yes. And it's going to ask for the root password. Okay, there we go. So we are back on track. We are installing 5.7, as you can see from the fast scrolling here. So I'm wondering what happens if I do my SQL and then user root and password. Oh. And so here we are, server version 5.7, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So hopefully this video has taught you some ideas on how to go about troubleshooting. As I've said many times before, a good amount of what a systems person does is figure out why something isn't working. Instructions aren't always aren't always up to date, and it's hard to keep them up to date. So, doing the Google searches, kind of knowing the vocabulary is very important. So, anytime you have issues with a package not installing or a package not recognized, what you need to do is look for repositories that support that package. Doing a Google search for MySQL 7 repository, MySQL 7 package repository, that sort of thing. And those should give you the answers. And the more you do this, the easier it becomes. It never becomes less frustrating, but it does become easier to find solutions to your problems. So in the next video, I think I'm going to talk about installing themes, and we'll get into things like the FTP client and SFTP clients in that video, and I'll show you how themes are installed, and we'll use my production server as kind of an example, I think. So hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.